So it's Thursday briefings, and I've got the Chief Minister with us this week, and hot off the press in the last half hour, the island's border restrictions to ease from the 11th of this month. This is just to go with the UK, right? Is it?
Yeah, I did indicate that in the briefing last week when I talked about moving to the endemic phase on the 31st of March. And it's a sensible move for us to now align our borders pretty much with what is going on in the UK. So there are some more changes, and it's part of a transition, I think a sensible transition in the current circumstances.
I mean, looking at this, it's the common travel area, you're okay. If you're coming still from other places, you need to still take a PCR, am I right on that basically, and in 48 hours? Broadly
now, that if you are coming in from within the common travel area and you are a Manx resident, and you're fully vaccinated, there is now no testing requirement or isolation requirements for you, and that also applies to unvaccinated residents coming onto the island, particularly if they've been abroad, but they are still required to undertake a PCR test.
Okay, and at the airport, and I presume the seaport, I've been just in the airport myself, still going to have those people there, still have to have that QR code, go through that whole process, filling the forms in, is that staying for?
Yes, I mean, again, we've made it clear that we will still require the landing form to be completed. That is an interim commitment of ours, and we haven't declared that will finish at any point. We will continue to monitor the situation, but again, as I made clear in the briefing, the pandemic is not over. Coronavirus, COVID is not over. We may indeed see further fluctuations in the numbers. It's likely to sort of come and go in waves still, but broadly speaking, the decision of the Council of Ministers around the protection now in place from the vaccines, our knowledge of how to manage COVID successfully, what needs to be done is there, and that's enabling us to really move forward.
Does this have any reflection on your consultation going out, or extending the consultation on landing and information about people coming to Alabama? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, let me be clear that I mean, there is a little bit of a fuss around that. It's a very simple piece of legislation actually that enables data to be shared between agencies, particularly specifically relating to security measures, and that's all it is. It should not be confused with border controls or anything else. It's a very simple piece of legislation that we are bringing forward.
But just so you know who's here and who's not? And
no, it just enables data to be shared between various government agencies, that's all.
So cometh the end of March, will there be no more QR codes, no more queuing up at the airport to go through that process, being given out stuff to go and test and that sort of thing? Is that the end of everything?
That is our intention. As I said, on the 31st of March we will end our processes, except if there are any red countries still in identification by the UK, in which case there will be isolation requirements if you're coming from a red country, but otherwise there will be no checks, and we're going to collapse the legal framework around isolation, and we are going to move forward back to a more normal stage, although there are still recommendations from government about how you will manage yourselves if you contract COVID.
Yeah. Again, I mean, we keep bringing it up, people watching these things, a lot of people with TT on their minds, the big event. It's go, and it's going to be pretty normal in this sense, I suppose, as it looks. I don't put words in your mouth. I mean, how do you see it? Let's ask you. The TT, do you think?
Well, we're committed. We're committed. We believe that we've set out a very clear approach to living with COVID in our documentation and the framework that we've brought forward. The TT and welcoming tourists to the island is now very much on the cards. We committed to it, and there's no reason why we shouldn't have a successful tourist season this year.
But as you've said already, and we all know in the back of our minds, we just don't know what's around the corner. I mean, that's the trouble, right? If there's a big issue, things will have to change. But anyway, that's what's down the line. But whatever the UK is doing, we're doing basically now. Is that roughly where we're talking about?
Well, no, I think actually it's not necessarily fair to say that. I think we've fallen in line with
England,
UK.
not Scotland or Wales, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, we've fallen in line with England and other measures across the United Kingdom where we felt that appropriate. But as you know, I think we've set out, one of the first to set out our approach to living with COVID as an endemic rather than a pandemic. And we were very much at the forefront of leading the way in terms of our approach to Omicron before Christmas, in terms of determining that we should move to lateral flow device testing as opposed to sticking with PCR, and also altering the isolation rules to ensure that we successfully managed a way through the spread that came and the rapidity of the spread that came with Omicron. So we have led the way in a number of areas, and where it's appropriate, we will move to fall in line with what is accepted practice in the common travel area, because we just don't see the point in hindering people's movements to and from the island where there is no firm evidence to do so. And most importantly, Paul, I think it is right that I refer to this. We have to have substance behind our decision making, and at all times, our priority is public health. But we believe that public health, is relatively protected in terms of the position that we're in, although COVID will still be present among us for some considerable time to come.
We'll talk about public health to some degree here. I mean, the headline's screaming out about water now. I know it's not your department, but at the end of the day, it's not good news when you see those sort of things about this untreated material going into the waters. Have you got an opinion on this yourself? An obvious sort?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we are going to make commitments to sort this out. Very conscious there are 2 or 3 areas around the island now where we have to make substantial progress. Peel is one of those areas, and one way or the other, we will sort this out.
Should have been sorted out years ago.
Well,
right?
within the lifetime of this administration, and I hope sooner than the end of this administration, we will have progress on that. Council of Ministers is very keen to ensure that. It's not nobody wants to read headlines anymore about raw sewage being pumped out into our seas, and it's something we're keeping a very close eye on. It should have been sorted. There's been a lot of delays, yes, and there's been a lot of arguments about actually where the regional sewage treatment plant should go, and in fact some quarters whether there should be a regional sewage treatment plant at all, and whether it should be pumped straight to Miri Veg. But we will get this sorted out one way or the other.
Some people may say these are the sort of things that should be talked about in the House of Keys and Timber rather than prayers. I mean, I sat there through the whole thing, 2.5 hours. People wanted to watch this thing, by the way, and certainly the passion level was high. Any thoughts on that? I mean, when you've got the island plan and no one reacts, I'm talking about the public, and you get something like this about who's going to say some prayers, or what, if you can be in the room or out the room. And I mean, you contributed at the very end as well about it, but are you kind of surprised in this day and age that these sort of things do take up so much more time than they maybe should?
Well, I think, again, possibly, rather like the island plan, the way that came forward was a bit of a shock to many people and did raise a lot of public concern about what was actually happening. Yeah, of course, it's one of those things that really doesn't necessarily directly impact on the problems of the day. Our heritage, our traditions, our framework in which we operate, though, is important to many people. It's important to politicians. It's important to many people on the outside. Occasionally these sorts of debates happen. Let's face it, though, it's not solving the immediate issues for many people out on the street and in business and in other social spheres. So, it's very much a quick return to normal business for us.
I haven't seen you since the was it Freedom of Information that came out about how many people in the government are over 50,000. The numbers are going up and up. What's going on? I mean, more people working in government means more money to be spent on them, and we're in times that are meant to be more difficult, should we say? Were you surprised? Or did you already know that? I suppose you already knew the information, but are you comfortable with the sort of pay rises that are going on in civil service and the amount of people that are earning good money?
I think pay has been broadly controlled. I think you've got to be very careful when you see whole government figures that you're not confusing this just as civil service or civil service. There are various categories of workers across government. The government workforce include teachers, they include nurses, they include public sector workers in all sorts of different capacities.
It's moving in the one direction.
It's never that comfortable, but broadly speaking, pay has been well controlled. We've set out, in the last 5 years, we've set out a very clear framework about how pay rises would be managed, and
so I
expect the Treasury Minister to set that out in the next 5 years.
You were there when it was the leaner government and there was going to be this whole transformation and all sorts of things, and I mean it was going down, now it's going up. I'm just kind of interested to know why. And
well, that's in terms of the numbers. We accept that the pandemic has meant that government in certain areas has had to strengthen its resources, and we've set out firm plans, particularly in health care, where we've needed the staff to meet the commitments relating to the Sir Jonathan Michaels report. So you've got to be careful, and I think these sorts of figures do require some in-depth analysis. The whole purpose for this government, really, as we're setting out at the moment, is around productivity, as of course we've set out around stewardship of public funds, and we've set out clear objectives and commitments for this government to meet as we move forward. The structure of government, the way that government is doing that, the staff that are committed to that will clearly be part of the discussions.
In another year, is it like to be still going zooming upwards? And I'm talking about here people earning the big bucks rather than just the Indians on the ground, not the chiefs sort of thing.
I think you've got to look at two clear factors, is the numbers of staff, and I very much hope that actually we will not start to see any significant increases on our staffing numbers. As I said, post-COVID, post the 31st of March, we're obviously going to have to clearly look in those areas where we do have additional staffing resources now and look to see what happens there. And of course, from a pay perspective, then we do need to recognise, of course, that the challenges for public finances remain, and they will be significant. The Treasury Minister will set out in his budget on Tuesday, the scale of the challenges and what needs to be done in terms of sort of medium-term financial planning in that respect, and I will set out the framework for everybody in terms of how we're going to do that.
So my last question is, give us on the chart, that's a bad budget, like pulling in, or it's a happy budget, or somewhere in the middle. Is there any good news? Let's try that one. Is there any good news for us, the basic taxpayers, in this budget?
Well, Paul, I know this is the remit of the Treasury Minister. I'm not about to take away from his announcements. Suffice to say, I very much hope that he will be reinforcing what we've promised to deliver within the Island Plan.